What's going on, everybody? We're back with another team review, and today we're looking at the Indianapolis Colts. There's some interesting news been coming out of Colts camp the last couple of days, few days over the weekend, mostly centered around Jonathan Taylor and him wanting a trade. Dad, how do you interpret this whole Jonathan Taylor situation?
Yeah, I don't blame him for asking. He had 1,800 yards 2 years ago, and of course he was a second round draft pick, so he's kind of getting paid chump change a little bit, and he wants a new contract, and Colts don't want to give it to him. We all know about the business part of it, and so we'll see what happens. He says he wants traded. He wants out of there, but he only wants out of there, of course, if somebody's going to sign him to, a decent contract. So a couple things have to happen. The Colts have to trade him, want to trade him, and then and they're not going to get a boatload of draft picks or anything like that. You'd be lucky to get a third or fourth rounder, I think.
Yeah.
And then the team has to want to sign him.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the Dalvin Cook situation. That guy's waiting for money, waiting for a team to offer him money, a decent contract, and that hasn't happened yet. So that's why he hasn't signed.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's tough. Like I don't know if I mentioned it on a video or just in casual conversation or not, but just talking about like the running back situation and kind of saying, well, Jonathan Taylor's going to be a good measuring stick about just how far, these teams are going in terms of devaluing the running back. Like, because Taylor was going to be 24 years old, 25 years old after this year, ready for a contract. He led the league in rushing 1 year. He should get a decent contract, right? And that's what I was thinking. But then this news comes out. It's like, man, if a 24-year-old running back who has led the league in rushing and, put up over 1,800 yards, it wasn't like a weak year of leading the league in rushing. If he can't get just a decent contract, and we don't know what the specifics are, what they offered or didn't, but that's kind of that's bad for running backs. They're in a very, very shitty situation. Like, something's going to have to change with their contract situation or how they get paid, or else we're going to see a huge devaluation of the talent at the running back position. Who's going to want to play running back anymore if even a 24-year-old can't get a decent contract? So it sucks to see, because I do think there's a huge difference between a Jonathan Taylor and a Deion Jackson or a Zach Moss, the guys that are backups on this team. There's a huge difference. And yeah, running backs, a lot of it is based on the offensive line as well. But you need those guys like Jonathan Taylor, the Saquon Barkleys, the guys that can make something out of nothing every now and then, that can, any other normal back would have been tackled for a 5-yard gain, and these guys bust off for a 40-yard touchdown run. Like, so there needs to be, I don't know, there needs to be something. I have some thoughts, but we're going to save that for another video. We're going to get into it. We're looking at the Colts again from a redraft perspective. We'll throw in dynasty. We'll throw in regular football stuff, but mostly from a redraft situation. We look at it from a half PPR point of view as well, but a lot of this can be applied to standard or PPR. And we're looking at starting with the quarterback situation. We talked about the Texans last video, rookie quarterback. We want to see Stroud play. These situations, I think the Carolina and the Texans, it's a little more clear, like, let the rookie start. This one, I think, is a little more muddy because you have a guy who's maybe a little more raw, and Anthony Richardson as a passer. And then you have a backup who has proven to be pretty good in spot starts and situations where he started, in Gardner Minshew. Dad, you put your money on it. Is Anthony Richardson starting? Again, it's August 1st. Put your money on it. Is Anthony Richardson starting week 1, or he's not?
Geez, I would tend to think, yeah, he should. I know Gardner Minshew is a pretty decent quarterback. But he's not the future. So we'll see. Part of the Colts being decent is they need Jonathan Taylor, but as we just kind of beat that subject up a little bit. So I do think Anthony Richardson will start, and I think he'll be the guy for until he either gets hurt or the team stinks so bad, or then they'll put Minshew in or something. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it will be interesting. I think he will start week one. Their head coach Shane Steichen is coming from Philadelphia, and he's going to run a similar offense, I think, there with that he did with Jalen Hurts. We'll kind of get into that in a little bit, but let's just assume Anthony Richardson starting week one. Now the question is, where do you draft him? How do you draft them? Because there's, we talk about rookie quarterbacks. Usually they don't hit. There's been a couple, Justin Herbert, Baker Mayfield, that have done well, but Anthony Richardson's a different kind of guy. He can run the ball. And so he's currently being drafted as QB 16 and 109th overall. So you have to get him in the 9th round. Dad, are you going to be interested in maybe taking a shot on Anthony Richardson? And if you are you pairing him up? Who are you pairing him up with just to have that safety blanket at the quarterback position?
I am. I would be interested at the right spot and stuff like that, and that's a big change for me, being an old school type guy. It's taken me a couple of years to really embrace running quarterbacks, and especially in fantasy football. I know you get I don't think it lasts for a very long time. Not like a Peyton Manning career or something like that. These guys running around and kind of getting their ass kicked on the field. I mean, look at Lamar Jackson the last 2 years. But anyway, I do find I would take a chance on Anthony Richardson. Geez, second quarterback. If I had somebody like Matt Stafford, that means that kind of means I'm drafting 2 quarterbacks a little earlier, I think, and stuff like that. But my second quarterback, maybe Kenny Pickett or Ryan Tannehill, those type guys. Baker Mayfield is, I think I barfed in my mouth when I said that, but those type of second quarterbacks, I would think,
Yeah, you can even go a step up, I think, than the guys you mentioned. My general philosophy on quarterbacks in one quarterback leagues is I don't like to really start thinking about taking one unless I see a value slip. Like if Mahomes falls to like round 4 or something, I'll take him. Or, right around round 8 is kind of where I start thinking about, okay, who's going to start? Who's a good value here? Like Deshaun Watson's one of those guys where I can see him finishing top 5. You can draft him in round 8. Anthony Richardson, you can do kind of what I call the double tap at quarterback position. You can, in round 9 and 10, you can take an Anthony Richardson and you can take a Geno Smith or a Jared Goff or Russell Wilson if you believe in Russell Wilson. But to me, that's like the perfect pairing. Like Anthony Richardson and Geno Smith, Anthony Richardson and Jared Goff. That's what I want if I'm going to take Anthony Richardson, because I have the super potential of Richardson, and I have what I think are going to be good quarterbacks in both Geno and Jared Goff, getting you 30 touchdowns, 4,400 yards, right? So that's kind of how I think I'm going to approach, if I can, this Anthony Richardson situation. Gardner Minshew, not very interested, even if he is the starter, because I don't think it's for very long, but maybe in a super flex. But we'll move on to the running backs. Lots of interesting news. We talked about it at the top of the episode of Jonathan Taylor potentially holding out, and and getting traded and all that. We're going to approach this that he's just on the Colts and he's going to be there for week 1 and have a couple weeks under his belt of training camp. Kind of the only way to talk about this on August 1st, really. Jonathan Taylor. I did make a video about this, just looking at the effect of rushing quarterbacks on running backs and what it does, because I think there's kind of two sides of it. A lot of people think, well, it's going to be good for the running back because they have to focus on the quarterback. Other people say, well, they take away attempts. So right now, Jonathan Taylor is still a first-round pick, 10th overall, RB5. So he's behind McCaffrey, Eckler, Bijan, and Barkley. Still have to take him in the first round, though. And I think I'm out if I have to take Jonathan Taylor in the first round. Not even with this whole contract dispute stuff. Even before all of that, I think I'm out. And there's a couple reasons why. And one of them is, again, I went back and looked at rushing quarterbacks that rush for 700 yards or more in a season, and where their number one running back finished. And there was only one that finished in the top 5. This is since the year 2000. So there's 19 guys who have done this. There's only been one that's finished top 5. Only been 3 others that finished top 10. Other than that, all those guys finished outside the top 10, RB10 is what I'm saying. And the guys that did finish in the top 10, all their quarterbacks had 7 or less touchdowns on top of the rushing. So I think the ceiling for Jonathan Taylor, if you draft him at RB5, you're drafting him at his absolute ceiling. And that worries me. The video's out on this channel if you want to check it out. So I'm just worried because I think if Anthony Richardson is starting week 1, I think it's almost impossible for him not to get 700 yards rushing. Do you agree with that, Dad? 700 yards in a 17-game season?
Yeah, I would definitely think that, I mean, the big thing is he going to get 3,000 yards of passing? So, I mean, not the big thing. I mean, the rushing,
Yeah, but the point is, I think he's going to hit that 700-yard threshold, and the stats are there. It's not good necessarily for running backs. If you do, you have to have a kind of a big touchdown or catch type of situation where I don't know if I see that for Jonathan Taylor. And Anthony Richardson's a big dude. He could easily steal goal line touchdowns easily. The guys that are hitting 700 yards but not getting more than 7 touchdowns are like Lamar Jackson's, Russell Wilson, Michael Vick, RG3. These are guys that are not big guys. Cam Newton's, Josh Allen's, Jalen Hurts. These are the guys, and that's who I kind of compare Anthony Richardson to, these big dudes that can just steal those touchdowns. So I'm, despite all the contract stuff, I'm kind of out on Jonathan Taylor. If I can get him at the mid to end of second round, I'm in. I don't want to take him. Dad, I'm going to ask you, do you want Nick Chubb or Jonathan Taylor this year?
Oh, Chubb.
Yeah.
Nick
Derrick
Chubb
Henry
by far.
Derrick Henry or Jonathan Taylor?
Derrick Henry.
Yeah. Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor?
Geez. I might go Taylor on this one.
Okay, that's fair. But, there's 2 more running backs kind of over Taylor that we're kind of both in agreement on. So I think at best we're thinking RB7, mid to late second round. Dad, do you have a different opinion on Jonathan Taylor, Dad? Or are you kind of are you avoiding him in terms of, let's say you have the pick 11, pick 12? Would you be fine with Taylor there, or are you going to go a different direction?
No, I'll go a different direction.
Yeah. Beyond that, I mean, Zach Moss, with the Taylor news of potentially holding out or traded, all that, we gotta acknowledge these backup running backs. Zach Moss was probably number 2 on the depth chart, broke his arm. He's going to be out 6 weeks. So not a season ender, but he's going to miss all of training camp and probably the first 2-3 weeks of the season. So that hurts. Deion Jackson's a guy that has flashed last year. When Jonathan Taylor was out, Deion Jackson had a couple really good games, actually. So he is intriguing, I would say, especially if Jonathan Taylor's not there. He's a big dude. He's 6 foot, 220. He can catch the ball. He had 10 catches in a game last year when Jonathan Taylor was out. He had 12 carries and 10 catches for 120 total yards. And then there's a rookie, Evan Hall, who, he's a smaller back. I think he's looked at it more as like a pass catcher. I don't know. Dad, do you see, if let's say Jonathan Taylor's not there, do you see this team like going all in on like a Deion Jackson, or are they just going to use like 2 or 3 guys and no one's going to be that fantasy relevant?
I think they would give Deion Jackson the most of the carries. I think he has enough. Looking at his game log last year, there's enough there to see that they were giving the guy the ball enough and stuff like that. And he'd probably, if Anthony Richardson's the quarterback, he definitely could take advantage of that situation. But
yeah,
I wouldn't have a huge problem with Deion Jackson.
Yeah. I'd take a chance. Like if you're for whatever reason drafting now, like I would take a shot on him for sure in the late rounds, like because he could be the guy. Especially with Zach Moss out. I'd imagine if they do trade Taylor and Zach Moss is out, they sign someone, a Fournette and Ezekiel Elliott, Dalvin Cook, all those guys, Kareem Hunt, all these guys are still floating out there. They're going to go somewhere, I would assume. So there's always that possibility as well. But as of now, take a shot on Deion Jackson. But so hard to tell with this situation. It's all up in the air as of now. So we'll move on to the receivers position, where I think there's a bit of a worry here in terms of you have a rookie, not only a rookie quarterback, you have a rookie running quarterback. What can we expect from these wide receivers? Dad, are you just kind of out on all of these guys? Is there someone you are interested in drafting, given, let's just say, assuming Anthony Richardson starts week 1?
I think I would look elsewhere, to be honest with you. If it comes down to choices, a Colts wide receiver will not be my first choice. But yeah, we they got a couple of okay ones, Pittman and Alec Pierce now is going to be his second year in the NFL. I don't know. I better have a lot of room that's on my roster if I'm picking one of these guys.
Yeah, it's so tough. It really is. I like Pittman. I think he's a good player. It just, again, I made a video on this, like just kind of looking at best case scenario for Anthony Richardson in terms of his passing. And it comes from a combination of Shane Steichen coming from the Eagles. If you guys remember, in 2021, the first 8 weeks of the season, 7 weeks of the season, the Eagles were throwing the hell out of the ball. And it was so much so that whenever they would run the ball, the crowd would start to cheer because they're like, finally, you're running the ball. And they went 2-5 over the first 7 weeks, throwing the ball 35, 40 times. And then they had a philosophy change, and they started to run the ball a lot more, and they were throwing the ball 25 times. And they ended up making the playoffs, the last 9 games or whatever that is, 10 games. They went 8-2 or something, made the playoffs. And ever since that point in 2021, that's kind of how the Eagles were operating, where they were running the ball a lot more than they were passing the ball. And so I think this is what they're going to do with the Colts and Anthony Richardson. They're going to pass the ball 25 to 28 times a game, and just kind of taking in historical stats of rookies and how they do. And that's giving best case scenario. And we know Anthony Richardson's a raw passer. It didn't look good. It didn't look good for the pass catchers, essentially. You can watch the video and see all the details, but Michael Pittman needs a 30% target share to even get to 1,000 or 1,100 yards. And there's 3 receivers every year that get a 30% target share. We're talking Cooper Kupps, Devontae Adams level guys. So I'm worried about these pass catchers. I will say, you can get a bit of a discount on Michael Pittman now. Like he's going in round 7, which I think is not terrible. That's reasonable in my opinion. In round 7, you think about you should have 3 receivers, 2 running backs, and potentially a quarterback by then, or 3 and 3, 3 running backs. So you're talking about like, I'd say by round 7, you probably have 3 wide receivers. You're talking about your wide receiver 4, which is basically a bench guy or maybe a flex, which isn't terrible. But Dad, Michael Pittman or Brandon Ayuk? That's the guy who's going around.
Brandon Ayuk.
Pittman or Christian Kirk?
Oh, Kirk. I like Kirk.
Yeah, me too. Pittman or Mike Evans?
Boy, Mike Evans, I think. He's
1,000
yards for 8 or 9, 10 years in a row, I guess, until he stops doing it.
Yeah.
I get a little worried about his quarterback too, though. But anyway, let's go on.
No, you're right. You're right. I think I might. Yeah, that's a tough one for me. We'll talk about the Tampa Bay guys when we get there. But one thing I will say is they're probably going to run an RPO style offense, which is what the Eagles did last year. I think a quarter of their plays were RPOs, which if you don't know is a run pass option. And what that means is the offensive line is blocking the run. They think you're running the ball. So what that means is you have to throw. You can't hold on to the ball and watch routes develop because the offensive linemen are moving downfield to block. And once they get downfield, it becomes an illegal forward pass, right? Or ineligible receiver down the field. So you have to throw the ball instantly. So basically, you if you don't run the ball, you throw it to one. You have one guy in your mind you're throwing it to, and that's why AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and even Dallas Goedert, the offense was so focused on those 3 players to where even though Jalen Hurts didn't throw for that many yards, I think it was only like 3,800 yards he threw for, 3,700. Even though he didn't throw that many yards, you saw AJ Brown, Devontae Smith both finish in the top 10, and Dallas Goedert was like top 5 tight end because it was just so focused on those 3 players. So you could see this situation with Michael Pittman where he is that RPO guy where he's going to get those targets. And then we're talking, but I just really feels like he's going to need a 8 to 10 touchdown type of year, in my opinion. So moving on, I mean, we're not very excited about their number 1 guy. I don't know how excited we can be about Alec Pierce and Josh Downs. I will say in like a best ball format, I think Alec Pierce is going to be kind of the deep threat with Anthony Richardson and his strong arm. So I'm kind of intrigued with Alec Pierce there and catching some deep bombs, but I don't really see much consistency here. Josh Downs, nice player. I know that he's getting talked up about being the best receiver in the draft class, whatever. I think maybe in the future he can be good, but Dad, any other guys you're kind of excited about here?
No, I think you kind of nailed it perfectly. Alec Pierce's second year, so you should see some improvement in his game. But again, if they're not much of a passing team, Josh Downs, yeah, I'd take a pass on him. So Dynasty, yeah, I'm going to draft him and, hold on to him and see what he can do.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I don't really see a path for I mean, again, we're talking Anthony Richardson. Like, I think best case scenario, the guy throws for well, I shouldn't say best case. I think it's more likely the guy throws for 3,300 yards, and you just do the math of well, if Pittman gets 1,000 of that and, let's say 800 has to go to running backs and tight ends, you got 1,500 yards between Downs and Pierce and all the other receivers. It just, the math doesn't add up unless he has a big rookie year passing. I just don't see it. So tight end is kind of the same situation. I mean, Jelani Woods is interesting because he's going into his second year. He's huge. I mean, they have a huge tight end room. I think these guys are 6'6" or 6'7" or something like that. So they're all big, Mo Alley Cox and stuff like that. But again, unless one of these guys catches 10 touchdowns, I don't really see a path for them being fantasy relevant. Anything you want to say on these tight ends, Dad?
No, I don't see the relevancy either. I mean, they're just what do they call him on NFL XM radio? Jag, just a guy. So that's kind of where I see it.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I don't know. Again, with this rookie running quarterback, there's not much to be excited about in the passing game. I'm kind of in on Anthony Richardson if he starts week 1. Jonathan Taylor, if I can get a value for him. Michael Pittman, yeah, if he's my wide receiver 4, I'll take a shot. Beyond that, not very excited. Dad, do you see this team competing for the division, or do you see them as one of the worst teams in the NFL, or kind of just a mediocre team?
No, I see these guys. I don't know if you got a rookie quarterback, and and that guy, what is he played 15 games or something like that. I don't see it. I don't see him being. Again, they're like the Texans. They win 6 to 8 games. I actually like the Texans a little better. They seem to be a little more established of a team. Colts got a okay defense and an okay offensive line. A lot of things have to happen correctly, though, and we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I kind of see them as kind of a mediocre 7-win team. So that's going to wrap it up for the Indianapolis Colts. Again, we kind of have back-to-back, there's like a couple guys that we're excited about. I'm not really super excited, but we're interested in, I guess, for fantasy for the Texans and for the Indianapolis Colts. Next up, we're talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars. So interesting, everyone's darling team there. There's some guys there that we're definitely interested in. So we'll be back with that in probably tomorrow in YouTube world. So as always, if you could like the video and subscribe, and we're going to finish up there. So we'll catch you guys